Ladies and gentlemen, when an avoidant starts to change, you won't hear it in their words, you'll feel it in their silence. The same person who once pulled away without warning suddenly pauses before leaving. The one who once needed distance begins to linger. Don't mistake that hesitation for indifference. That's fear turning into love. That's a guarded heart learning how to stay. And if you walk away too soon, you might miss the moment they were finally ready to love you the way they always wanted to, but never knew how. And there comes a moment in every relationship with an avoidant person when the air changes. It's subtle, almost invisible at first. You might not even notice it until one day you realize they're not running anymore. The same person who used to pull away when you got close, who needed distance the moment you needed reassurance, is now doing something completely different. They're showing up. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but differently. And if you're not paying attention, you might mistake that quiet shift for indifference, when in reality, it's the most courageous act of love they've ever shown. And you see, people with avoidant tendencies aren't afraid of love itself. They're afraid of the pain that love might bring. They learned somewhere along the way that closeness meant danger, that needing someone meant weakness, and that vulnerability could only ever lead to disappointment. So when they start to care about you, their first instinct isn't to move closer, it's to back away. That's their protection mechanism, their armor. And for a long time, that armor kept them safe. But when love, real love, enters the picture, something begins to shift. And at first, it doesn't look like love. It looks like hesitation. It looks like them being quieter than usual. It looks like them overthinking every word they send or retreating into silence when emotions rise. But underneath all of that is a battle, a war between the version of them that wants to keep control and the version of them that's terrified to lose you. And when you start to see them choose connection over avoidance, when they start to open up even just a little, that's not a small thing. That's love in its rawest form. And because for an avoidant, love isn't a grand gesture, it's a risk. It's a crack in the wall they've built for years. When they start texting first, when they make space for you in their day, when they begin sharing the smallest details about their world, it's not casual, it's monumental. It means they're trying. They're fighting instincts that once convinced them that closeness equals danger. They're trying to unlearn everything that told them love isn't safe. And this is where most people get it wrong. They see an avoidant start to pull back again, and they assume it's the end. They take it personally. They think, they must not care. They must not want me anymore. But often, that's not what's happening. That withdrawal isn't rejection, it's recalibration. They're testing if it's safe to keep their heart open. They're asking quietly, can I trust this connection not to destroy me? And if you can hold steady during that storm, not by chasing them, not by begging, but by staying grounded in your own energy, you become the evidence they've never had. The evidence that love doesn't have to hurt. And it takes a strong person to love someone with avoidant tendencies, not because you have to fix them, but because you have to love without losing yourself. You have to understand that when they seem distant, they're not always leaving, they're learning. They're learning how to let love in without fear. They're learning that connection can exist without control. And when they start to soften, when they start letting you see parts of them they used to hide, that's not weakness. That's the bravest thing they've ever done. And when you see this shift, the one where they start reaching out more, making eye contact longer, letting silence exist without running from it, you're witnessing transformation. They're not just loving you, they're reprogramming what love means in their nervous system. They're slowly replacing fear with trust. And that's not something you walk away from. That's something you honor. But let me be clear, honoring it doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or accepting emotional starvation. It means recognizing the difference between someone who doesn't care and someone who's scared to care too much. It means having empathy, not excuses. Boundaries, not ultimatums. You can give them space without abandoning your own needs. You can show consistency without sacrificing your self-worth. That balance is what allows the relationship to evolve. And because when an avoidant starts to fall in love, their love doesn't come wrapped in flowers and poetry. It comes in small, imperfect gestures, the late night check-ins, the vulnerability that sneaks into a conversation, the moments they admit they don't want to lose you. Those are not casual confessions. Those are revolutions. And so when you see that shift, when you notice the walls lowering and the distance shrinking, Understand that you're not just witnessing love, you're witnessing healing. And healing takes time. It's not linear. There will be steps forward and steps back. But if they're showing effort, if they're meeting you halfway, if they're choosing connection more often than escape, that's love trying its best to survive its own fear. And don't walk away when they start to open. Don't assume their hesitation means disinterest. Sometimes the quietest efforts are the loudest declarations, and sometimes the most avoidant hearts are the ones that love the deepest once they finally feel safe enough to stay. And when an avoidant begins to let their guard down, it doesn't always look like a movie moment. There's no dramatic confession, no sudden burst of emotion. It's quieter than that. It's in the way they linger just a little longer when saying goodbye. It's in the text they send that says, "Hope you got home safe," when before they might have gone silent for days. It's in the way they start to let you see their routines, their flaws, their moods, the parts of themselves they've always hidden because they never believed anyone could love them there. These small changes are their way of saying, "I trust you," even if those words never leave their lips. And you have to understand something. For someone who's spent most of their life depending only on themselves, letting another person in feels like surrender. It's terrifying. They've built their identity on being in control, on staying safe by staying distant. So when they start choosing connection, they're fighting against a lifetime of conditioning. Every time they respond instead of retreat, every time they share instead of shut down, they're choosing love over fear. That's growth, not regression. And the truth is, avoidants often love the deepest. They just love in silence. They observe before they trust. They test before they open up. And sometimes that testing comes in the form of withdrawal, a sudden pause, or a moment of distance. It's not that they want to hurt you. It's that they need to make sure that when they step forward, it's safe to stay there. When they've been let down before, they learn that intimacy can vanish, that closeness can turn to pain overnight. So they hesitate even when their heart is already leaning toward you. And this is where your strength matters most. Not strength in chasing, not strength in over-explaining, but strength in holding your ground. When you stay calm in the face of their fear, when you don't punish them for their pauses, you show them something revolutionary. You show them that love doesn't demand perfection. You show them that they can breathe around you, that their walls can lower and they won't be met with chaos or criticism. But let's be honest, it's not easy to love someone who withdraws when things get real. It tests your patience, your confidence, your sense of worth. It makes you question, am I doing something wrong? But that's where emotional maturity steps in. Because if you can look beyond the surface and see that their distance is not rejection but protection, you start to realize that their behavior isn't about your value, it's about their fear. And fear doesn't disappear through pressure. It dissolves through consistency, compassion, and calm. And when they begin to soften, you'll see small but powerful signs. They'll start to communicate what they feel instead of shutting down completely. They might share stories from their past that explain the walls they've built. They might even admit that closeness scares them. That confession alone is a massive breakthrough because avoidants rarely admit fear. They prefer to appear self-sufficient, untouchable. So when they start showing vulnerability, that's not just love, it's transformation in real time. And what they're doing in those moments is rewriting their internal narrative. They're learning that love isn't a trap, that it's possible to be close and still free. That connection doesn't have to cost them their identity. And when that realization starts to sink in, their behavior changes. They begin to make small efforts that carry enormous meaning, like checking in after an argument instead of disappearing, or expressing affection without fear of being seen as weak. Those are not casual moments, they're milestones. But remember, growth for them won't be linear. Just when you think you've reached a breakthrough, they might retreat again. Don't take it as defeat. Think of it as part of their healing rhythm. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. What matters is the trend, not the temporary setback. If you look closely, you'll notice that each time they come back, they return with a little more openness, a little more trust. That's love unfolding in slow motion. And the way you respond during those moments defines the direction of the relationship. If you meet their fear with anxiety, it feeds their belief that closeness equals pressure. But if you meet it with self-assured peace, you show them that love can coexist with space. You teach them without words that they can stay connected and still breathe. That lesson changes everything. and you don't need to be perfect for them. You don't need to be endlessly patient or sacrifice your own needs. You just need to be grounded enough to see their patterns for what they are, protective, not punitive. You need to understand that love for them is not about constant affection, it's about safety. When they feel safe, love flows. When they feel threatened, they hide. So your job isn't to chase them out of hiding, it's to create an environment where hiding isn't necessary. And there's beauty in loving someone who's learning how to love. It's like watching a flower bloom after years of drought. It's slow, it's fragile, but it's real. And when you finally see that softness stay, when their eyes stop darting for exits and start resting on you, you'll realize something profound. They didn't just choose you, they chose healing through you. And that's why when you see this shift, when their tone softens, when their presence becomes steadier, don't walk away thinking it's not enough. It might not look like the love you're used to, but it's love in the purest form, a love that's fought through fear, through walls, through years of self-protection. It's a love that doesn't always know how to express itself, but is trying every day to learn. And that effort, that quiet persistence, is what makes it worth noticing. And so when you see them beginning to stay instead of run, when they lean in instead of shut down, understand that you're not witnessing a small change, you're witnessing the start of a new way of loving. One built not on avoidance, but on trust. One that says, I'm still scared, but I'm here. And that single choice, to stay despite fear, is where love truly begins. And the truth is, when an avoidant reaches that point where they stop running, it's not because the fear has vanished. It's because the connection finally means more than their comfort zone. They've spent years believing that emotional distance was their protection, that independence was their only form of safety. But when love starts to feel genuine, when someone makes them feel seen without judgment, that armor begins to feel heavy. They start realizing that being alone isn't freedom when their heart quietly aches for connection. That's when the real shift happens, not because they suddenly stop being afraid, but because they've decided that the possibility of losing you scares them more than the risk of staying open. But this moment, this turning point, is fragile. It requires patience, awareness, and a deep understanding of emotional balance. Because even when they begin to let you in, the old patterns don't disappear overnight. There will still be moments when they retreat into silence or pull back just as things start to feel intimate. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they're scared that the closeness will cost them their sense of control. It's instinctive, almost automatic, and your reaction in those moments determines whether the relationship grows or collapses under the weight of misunderstanding. And if you can stay grounded, if you can respond with calm instead of panic, you become a mirror that reflects safety back to them. Not by chasing, not by convincing, but by standing steady. They start to see that their old fears don't have to dictate this new connection. They begin to understand that intimacy doesn't have to mean suffocation. When they reach out after retreating, even with something as simple as a message or a gesture of care, that's a massive act of courage. They might not say, I missed you, but their energy will say it for them. They might not express love in the ways you expect, but they'll express it in the ways they know how, through effort, through showing up, through quiet consistency. And that's where so many people misunderstand avoidant love. It's not the absence of feeling, it's feeling so intensely that they don't know what to do with it. They love deeply, but that depth frightens them. They long for closeness, but too much closeness feels like drowning, so they dance in between, pushing and pulling, testing and retreating, trying to find a version of love that feels both safe and alive. When they start to settle into that rhythm with you, when the gaps between connection and withdrawal become shorter, that's a sign their nervous system is learning that love doesn't equal danger anymore. And it's a slow unlearning. They start by showing small forms of vulnerability, sharing something personal, inviting you into their world, or admitting that they find it hard to open up. Those moments may seem small to you, but for them, they're monumental. You're witnessing the beginning of emotional trust, the kind that takes years to build but seconds to lose. And that's why consistency matters more than anything. Not perfection, not endless availability, but consistency, the quiet assurance that you'll still be there, solid, even when they wobble. And because love for an avoidant isn't built in grand gestures, it's built in stability. It's built when they see that you don't crumble when they pull back, that you don't chase them out of fear, that you give them space without guilt. That's how you show them that love can coexist with freedom. They start to feel something new, a sense of safety they've never experienced before. It's in that safety that love begins to deepen. And they may not always have the words to express it, but you'll see it in the small things, in the way they look at you when you're not paying attention, in the way they remember details you thought they forgot, in the way they choose to stay even when it would be easier to run. Those are quiet love letters written in action, not words, and they mean everything. And when you start to see this version of them, more open, more emotionally available, even if it's imperfect, understand that you're witnessing the reward of patience, empathy, and emotional strength. You've become the person they feel safest with, and that's not something they give easily. They don't trust because they're told to trust. They trust because they feel it. They trust because your energy tells them, you're safe here. But this doesn't mean you carry the relationship on your back. It doesn't mean you lose yourself in their healing. Your steadiness isn't about becoming their anchor. It's about being your own. It's about showing them that love doesn't require them to lose their independence. And that connection doesn't mean control. When you embody that truth, you model what healthy love looks like. You show them that two people can be close and still be free, can be honest and still be strong, can be vulnerable and still be safe. And over time, that energy becomes contagious. They begin to mirror it. They start to open up without needing reassurance first. They start to reach out not from panic, but from genuine desire. That's when you'll know the shift is real, when their love becomes proactive instead of reactive, when their presence feels steady instead of cautious. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen if the space feels right. And the beauty of this transformation is that it's not one-sided. As they grow, you grow too. You learn how to communicate with more patience, how to listen without judgment, how to love without attachment. You start to understand that love isn't about fixing someone. It's about creating a space where they feel free enough to fix themselves. And that's what happens when you stay grounded through their evolution. You become the calm in the storm that helps them find peace within themselves. And so when that shift begins, when the avoidant you once thought would never open up starts to lean in, when their words become more real, when their silence becomes shorter, understand the magnitude of what you're witnessing. You're not just seeing love form, you're seeing fear unravel. You're watching someone rewrite their entire emotional story because they finally found a reason to believe in connection again. And that kind of love, the one that survives fear, hesitation, and self-protection, is the kind that changes both people forever. And when you reach this point with someone who once ran from love, you begin to see the layers that most people never get to see. Underneath the coolness, the silence, the moments of withdrawal, there's a person who has spent years protecting their heart from pain they could never fully express. And now, for the first time, they're allowing themselves to feel it all, the hope, the fear, the uncertainty, the tenderness. It's confusing for them, overwhelming even, but it's real. You can see it in the way they pause before they speak, in the way they search your eyes for reassurance they won't admit they need. You're witnessing the emotional awakening of someone who has lived most of their life behind a wall. But make no mistake, even in this awakening, fear doesn't vanish, it shifts, it becomes quieter, more subtle. It shows up in small hesitations, a long silence after a deep moment, a retreat after a weekend that felt too intimate, a sudden distraction after an emotional conversation. That's how their nervous system processes safety. It tests it. It doesn't trust it instantly. It studies it, pokes at it, waits to see if the comfort it feels will vanish like it always did before. And this is where most relationships with avoidance fail, because many people mistake that testing for rejection, when in truth, it's a sign of progress. They wouldn't be testing the connection if they didn't care about it. They only test what matters. And when they start to trust you with their emotions, they're not giving you permission to fix them. They're giving you the most fragile piece of themselves. The part that says, I want to be loved, but I don't know how to let it happen. That's not manipulation. It's vulnerability disguised as confusion. And if you can see that, if you can hold space for their uncertainty without needing constant reassurance, you become something different to them. You become the exception. You become the first person who doesn't punish their fear, but understands it. And in that understanding, something shifts not just in them, but in you. You start to realize that patience isn't weakness. That calm doesn't mean complacency. That love can be powerful even when it's quiet. You learn to read the unspoken language, the way they express affection through actions, the subtle ways they say, I care, without words. They might not be loud with emotion, but they'll start doing small things that mean everything. They'll listen to your words more deeply. They'll remember what matters to you. They'll make time, even if time has always been their most guarded possession. And in those gestures, you'll see love unfolding in a way that doesn't look like the movies, but feels more real than anything you've known. And still, even with all this progress, there will be moments when the fear resurfaces. Don't romanticize it, but don't panic either. Healing from avoidance isn't linear, it's cyclical. They'll take steps forward, then retreat to make sure the ground beneath them is still solid. They'll get close, then pull back, not because they've lost interest, but because closeness still feels unfamiliar. In those moments, your steadiness matters more than your words. If you chase, they'll retreat further. If you guilt them, they'll shut down. But if you stand firm, peaceful, and self-assured, you'll communicate something they've never felt before: security without pressure. That's what teaches their heart that love can coexist with freedom. And they might not thank you for it directly. They might not even realize what's happening right away. But over time, they'll begin to associate your presence with peace instead of anxiety. That's when love starts to become safe. That's when the avoidant heart finally begins to stay open longer than it closes. You'll notice it in subtle shifts, in the way they start to communicate when something feels off instead of disappearing, in the way they start saying, I need a little time, instead of vanishing altogether. That's the language of progress, the voice of someone learning how to love in real time. And that's why this kind of love isn't for the faint-hearted. It requires emotional maturity. It requires knowing when to lean in and when to step back, not out of fear, but out of respect for both your needs. It's about holding space, not holding on too tightly. It's about being the calm energy that helps them find their own calm, not the chaos that confirms their fears. And while that takes strength, it also takes deep self-awareness, because you can't teach someone safety if you haven't found it within yourself first. But when it works, when both people are growing together instead of reacting against each other, it's unlike anything else. You begin to see how love can heal things that therapy, books, or distance never could. You start to understand that connection, when handled with care, can rewire years of emotional conditioning. The avoidant learns that love doesn't have to suffocate. You learn that love doesn't have to chase. And between those two truths, something incredible emerges, a partnership built on mutual understanding rather than fear. And when they start showing you pieces of themselves they used to hide, when they admit that your presence makes them feel something unfamiliar, something both terrifying and comforting, you're witnessing emotional bravery in its purest form. They might not say, I love you, as often, but they'll show it in 1,000 other ways, through loyalty, through effort, through the quiet decision to stay when every part of their old self tells them to run. And in that staying, in that quiet consistency, love begins to take on a different meaning. It's no longer about the intensity of emotions, it's about the depth of connection. It's about knowing that when they choose to be here, it's not out of obligation or habit, but because they genuinely want to be. That's when you know the shift is real. That's when you realize that the person who once feared love the most has finally begun to understand it. And they're not avoiding because they don't care anymore. They're learning how to stay without losing themselves. They're not withdrawing to test your love. They're learning how to feel without drowning in it. Every time they come back a little sooner, open up a little deeper, love a little braver, you're witnessing the miracle of emotional growth. And that kind of transformation, once it begins, doesn't fade easily. It becomes the foundation for a love that's no longer driven by fear, but by choice, a love that's earned, not just felt.